Ever wondered how the world's two superpowers ended up in a 4 decades-long standoff known as the Cold War? As the dust settled from the devastation of World War II, two nations emerged as global titans, the United States and the Soviet Union. The world had never seen such concentration of power, and with it came an intense rivalry that would shape the second half of the 20th century. Their contrasting ideologies became the bedrock of this rivalry. The United States, with its capitalist democratic values, and the Soviet Union championing communism, found little common ground. These differences sparked tension and mistrust, fueling a growing sense of uncertainty. Their mutual suspicion led to an ideological tug-of-war, each side fearing the other's desire for global dominance. These disparate beliefs and fears didn't just create a divide, they started a race for influence, for allies, for supremacy. So the stage was set for a global power struggle, a war not fought with bullets and bombs but with words and ideas. Imagine waking up one day to find your country divided by an iron curtain. This is not a physical curtain, but a metaphorical one, symbolizing a profound ideological divide. This was the reality for many in the aftermath of World War II, as the world split into two major blocs, the Democratic West and the Communist East. The term Iron Curtain was famously coined by Winston Churchill in a speech in 1946. He described an invisible line that ran from the Baltic Sea in the north to the Adriatic Sea in the south, separating the Soviet-dominated East from the Democratic West. This curtain symbolized a world divided, not just by physical borders, but by stark ideological differences. Democracy versus communism, capitalism versus socialism. In the West, the United States emerged from the war as a superpower, committed to promoting and protecting democracy worldwide. This commitment was articulated in what came to be known as the Truman Doctrine. Named after President Harry Truman, this policy marked a significant shift in American foreign policy. The Truman Doctrine pledged that the United States would provide political, military, and economic assistance to all democratic nations under threat from external or internal authoritarian forces, essentially aiming to contain the spread of communism. The Truman Doctrine was put into action in several instances, perhaps most notably in Greece and Turkey. Both nations were at risk of falling under Soviet influence after the war, and the United States, following the principles of the Truman Doctrine, provided substantial aid to ensure their stability and prevent a communist takeover. So the Iron Curtain and the Truman Doctrine served as defining features of the early Cold War period. They encapsulated the ideological battle lines that had been drawn between East and West, a struggle that would shape global politics for decades to come. The world was now divided, not just by borders but by stark ideological differences. How does a race to the stars sound? Exciting or terrifying? With the Cold War in full swing, the United States and the Soviet Union found themselves locked in a high-stakes competition that extended far beyond the borders of their respective nations, the arms race and the space race. The arms race was a terrifying game of cat and mouse, each superpower striving to outdo the other in military might. This competition was no mere flexing of muscles, it was a deadly dance that threatened the very existence of the world. The development of nuclear weapons and intercontinental ballistic missiles escalated the tension to a fever pitch. The world was on a knife's edge, watching as each new announcement of a successful test or deployment upped the ante. Then, as if the prospect of nuclear annihilation wasn't enough, another race began, this time not just for earthly dominance, but for the stars themselves. The space race took the Cold War to new heights, quite literally. The launch of Sputnik by the Soviet Union in 1957 was a shock to the American system, a wake-up call that signaled the Soviets were ahead in the game. This was not just about national pride, but about demonstrating technological prowess and strategic advantage. The space race was on, and the stakes were higher than ever. Each successful mission, each astronaut or cosmonaut launched into space, was another point scored in this cosmic contest. The United States' triumphant moon landing in 1969 was not just a giant leap for mankind, but a significant leap in this ongoing game of one-upmanship. In this race for supremacy, every advancement was met with apprehension and awe. Each breakthrough, while a testament to human ingenuity, also served as a chilling reminder of the destructive power that these superpowers wielded. While the world watched in awe and fear, the superpowers continued their high-stakes game of one-upmanship. What happens when other nations get caught in the crossfire of the superpowers' rivalry? This question brings us to the stage of proxy wars, a grim theater where the United States and Soviet Union outsourced their conflict, often with devastating results. During the Cold War, both superpowers were keen to spread their ideologies, capitalism and communism throughout the world. But they had to tread carefully to avoid direct military confrontation that could lead to a nuclear war. The solution? Proxy wars. These were conflicts in third countries, where the superpowers provided support in the form of weapons, funds or troops to the side that aligned with their ideological stance. Take the Korean War, for instance. It was a bloody conflict that lasted from 1950 to 1953, with North Korea and its communist allies on one side, and South Korea and its capitalist allies on the other. The United States and Soviet Union never directly engaged in the battlefield, yet their fingerprints were all over the war. Then there was the Vietnam War, another tragic example of a proxy war. From 1955 to 1975, the United States invested heavily in the conflict, supporting South Vietnam against the communist North Vietnam, backed by the Soviet Union and China. This war was a brutal illustration of the human cost of ideological disputes between superpowers. But no event in the Cold War came closer to igniting a full-blown nuclear conflict than the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. For 13 nerve-wracking days, the world watched as the United States and the Soviet Union teetered on the brink of nuclear war, all because of Soviet nuclear missiles installed in Cuba, just 90 miles off the coast of Florida. The crisis ended with a secret agreement. The Soviets would dismantle their missiles in Cuba, and the Americans would secretly remove their missiles from Turkey. The world held its breath as the doomsday clock ticked closer to midnight. The Cuban Missile Crisis was a stark reminder of the terrifying potential of the Cold War to escalate into a nuclear catastrophe. Can a war really end without a single shot being fired? This question may seem baffling, but it aptly describes the culmination of the Cold War. The final years of this ideological battle were marked by significant events, none more symbolic than the fall of the Berlin Wall. The Berlin Wall, an emblem of division not just between East and West Germany, but the entire world, crumbled in November of 1989. For 28 years, it had stood as a physical manifestation of the Iron Curtain, separating families, friends, and ideologies. Its collapse signaled the beginning of the end for the Cold War, as it marked a pivotal shift towards openness and reform. This shift was largely due to the policies of Mikhail Gorbachev, the last leader of the Soviet Union. Gorbachev introduced two key reforms: glasnost, or openness, and perestroika, or restructuring. Glasnost allowed for greater freedom of speech and transparency in government, while perestroika aimed to revitalize the Soviet economy through the introduction of some market-oriented practices. These policies, while controversial, were instrumental in setting the stage for the end of the Cold War. However, Gorbachev's reforms could not save the Soviet Union from its internal issues. The weakened economy, coupled with rising nationalist movements, led to the dissolution of the Soviet Union. On December 25, 1991, the Soviet flag flew over the Kremlin for the last time. 15 independent republics emerged from the ashes of what was once a superpower, marking the definitive end of the Cold War. These events unfolded not with the deafening roar of guns and bombs, but with the quiet rustling of change. The world watched in awe as a war fought with words, ideologies, and political maneuverings ended, not in a battlefield, but in the hearts and minds of the people. And just like that, the Cold War ended, leaving a world forever changed and a legacy that continues to shape global politics. So what does this all mean in the grand scheme of things? The Cold War, a conflict of ideologies between the world's superpowers, shaped the latter half of the 20th century. It led to the creation of the Iron Curtain and the Truman Doctrine, which both played pivotal roles in defining the political landscape of the era. The arms race and space race, spurred by this tension, propelled humanity to new heights of scientific and technological achievement. Yet the same tension also triggered various proxy wars and brought the world to the brink of nuclear disaster during the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Cold War may have ended with the dissolution of the Soviet Union, but its impact persists. It shaped the world, influencing international relations, politics, and even culture. Today, we continue to grapple with its legacy, seen in ongoing geopolitical tensions and the race for technological dominance. The Cold War may be over, but its echoes can still be heard in our world today.